Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session about unlocking the power of data-driven attribution in Google Analytics 4 properties. My name is Matthijs Wielings. I'm a global product lead on Google Analytics. With me today are Naomi and Mats. For those of you who've been working in the attribution space, they'll probably have seen Mats before. Mats is our EMEA lead for the go-to-market strategy for analytics and attribution. Naomi is a global product lead as well, like myself, and she's covering attribution specifically in Google Analytics. We have an interesting agenda for you today. 3 items. I'll kick it off with the evolution of cross-channel attribution at Google. And then Naomi will take over and she'll cover attribution in Google Analytics 4 properties. And then finally, Mats will go into the ad buying part of attribution when using Google Analytics 4. So a couple of household things. You can submit questions in the chat that should be available to you right now, and we'll leave questions. We'll leave time for questions at the end. So we've gotten a few questions before, so we'll cover those, and then we'll also have some time for the live questions. So with that, I'll just jump straight into the content, which is the evolution of cross-channel attribution at Google. Some of you know we've launched DDA in various shapes and sizes. This has started quite a while back already with Google Analytics 360, but we've always done this with the objective of helping you on one hand with optimizing your campaigns, and on the other hand, understanding better where to invest your next marketing euro. Now, as I said, we started with GA360. This was very advanced, available to everybody using the 360 property type, but that also was one of the drawbacks, which meant that users of GA standard wouldn't be able to leverage DDA. That's why we at some point launched attribution in Universal Analytics as a beta solution. This brought basically DDA to everybody for free. It was also covering more touch points than the GA360 model would cover. But it still had some drawbacks. Think of measuring user journeys that span across app and web, for example. And this is exactly why we've launched DDA in Google Analytics 4 properties. So the objective with GA4 is to bring a couple of things together. And that is actually starting with the GA4 conversion event. This event can be tracked across app and web, as I said, but we also allow to measure events coming from, for example, YouTube campaigns, or measure cross-device, just web cross-device. And this is making it our most comprehensive conversion event. And ultimately, in the future, it will also be available to bid to that conversion event in all of the ad buying doors that we offer. So Google Ads, SA360, as well as DV360. And on top of that event, we've built DDA. So I want to dive a little deeper into the different DDA models that we offer, because as you can see here, we have all of our platforms listed, and all of these platforms do offer data-driven attribution. So it might be interesting to understand what the differences are between those models. Before jumping into the differences, actually one of the consistencies, and that is that right now DDA is available for free for everyone across all of our products, all of our platforms. That's the first big thing. So starting with Google Ads, of course, you are able to buy ad campaigns on Google Search, on Display, and YouTube, and for a couple of other formats. DDA in Google Ads offers you the option to attribute credit across these touchpoints within Google Ads, but it's limited to Google Ads, of course, because it cannot look beyond the touchpoints outside of Google Ads. If you go a level higher, you'll see Search Ads 360. This allows you to have data-driven attribution across all of your search buys. So it could be Google, it could also be Bing, and any other inventory that you buy. The third one is DV360 and Campaign Manager. This is, of course, available if you use floodlight tags, and this allows you to measure all of your display and video buys and measure that across these inventory sources in the data-driven methodology. And then finally, we have GA4 at the top here. So this is currently replacing our Universal Analytics DDA offering, because, as I said, it's more comprehensive, but it's also available for everyone across the platform. Now, one thing to point out here is that if you use DDA just for reporting in GA4, you don't benefit from all the upsides that DDA has. So if you buy ads in either of these three platforms or in a combination of the three, we do recommend to also switch to data-driven attribution within those platforms, even if you're already using DDA in GA4. So it's really crucial to leverage the benefits of DDA. Of course, GA conversions also integrated with these platforms, but it might be that you use ads pixels or floodlight pixels or even offline conversion import, and these can also be switched to DDA. And then the model itself. For those of you who have been around, you've probably heard parts of this conversation already, but we've made two major improvements to our DDA model. And this is why we think that our current model is actually our most powerful model. And therefore, we also think that you might find benefit in using GA4 DDA. So it always starts with a path comparison, right? If we want to understand the value of an interaction. What we're trying to understand in that path comparison is what the difference in conversion rate would be if we have, let's say, a two-step conversion path versus a three-step conversion path. If we compare those, we can see what that additional step in the path, that additional touch point with a customer, what that drives in terms of conversion rate. So we do that for all our DDA models, and we do that for both converting and non-converting paths. So we also understand what doesn't drive incremental conversion rate. The second bit, and this is actually one of the two major new improvements, is time to event. And what we effectively do here is we try to understand, is a touch point closer to a conversion more valuable or less valuable than it is further away from a conversion event? And to give an example, this could be something like branded search. You might see a branded search click right before the moment of conversion. And it's always a question, is that branded search click going to drive any incremental value in the conversion rate? Our latest DDA model is able to deal with that challenge and better attribute conversion credit. Then the ad features. This is something we've been using for a long while already. And these are things like search versus display campaigns, mobile versus desktop. These are the type of, how you'd say, technical differences of one touch point versus another. The fourth thing is incrementality calibration. And this is incrementality in the statistical sense of the word. So would this conversion have happened with or without this conversion anyway? And good thing to remember here is that we apply this incrementality calibration to Google's touchpoints, so Google's paid touchpoints, and not to the other bits of the conversion path. So if there's email in the path, that doesn't change. It's just the Google search, display, and video touchpoints that we apply this to. And this will help you to get a better understanding in one path what is actually driving that incremental conversion rate that drives users to convert on a web page. And the final element is a correction for unresolved paths. And this is effectively to say that we adjust our conversion credit for paths that we think are broken. So by now, your GA data and probably also data outside of GA is affected by some forms of tracking prevention, maybe, or users deleting their cookies. And we apply a logic here that helps us to understand what the conversion paths would be if these users wouldn't have deleted their cookies. And then the benefits of switching to GA4 DDA, and especially when doing so in Google Ads. These are catered around three different topics. So the first bit is a better attribution. Simply the fact that what I showed you just now, the input elements of a DDA model are so much better than the last click model, which is just a rule, right? It's just the last click gets all credit. So you'll be able to benefit from that incrementality calibration, the time to event calibration, something that many of you have been asking for. And so that's the first part. The second part is about better smart bidding. So I know that the majority of you out there are actually using smart bidding if you buy ads with Google. That's a great thing because that means that our smart bidding algorithms can understand all of these touch points that precede the last click. If you have a conversion rate of 5%, that means, and you're on last click, that means that 95% of the interactions might as well go uncredited at all. You basically say, well, these don't have any value at all. If you move to DDA, you look at all the touch points in the path, and therefore you look at all the different points of information that your user base is providing you to optimize media buys. And then finally, there's reporting. So you get better insights to understand how to allocate your budgets, better insights to understand how to spend your next euro, And this, of course, has a subsequent effect on your efficiency as a business. So I think here we've gotten a lot of feedback about our transparency into our models. That's something we've been trying to tackle. So for you in the slides are available a research white paper. This is a scientific white paper, so written in that sense that data scientists can read through it and better understand how we apply all of these incrementality calibration and so on. And we also have a slightly simpler one pager, which is also available to you. If you can't get it here in the slides, you definitely have a point of contact in Google that can help you get that resource. The white paper, I have created a short link off of it. So if you quickly want to type this over, 3TM82 capital X, capital G, and then you can read along. Now, before we launch things, we always check impact. And what we know from advertisers, from internal studies on advertisers that have moved to a last click attribution, to a non-last click attribution model. So they've moved beyond last click, is what I meant to say. And we see that they reach their goals more efficiently. And to put a number on that, they get 5% more conversions at a similar CPA, which is, of course, yeah, it sounds small, but it's very significant. And therefore, yeah, we can also prove that this has a positive effect on the efficiency of businesses buying ads with Google. This was what I had to say about the introduction. We're gonna switch gears a little bit. Naomi will take over, and she'll present to you about the attribution functionalities within Google Analytics 4 properties. So over to you, Naomi.
Thank you, Matthias. As Matthias mentioned, I'll be covering the attribution reporting in Google Analytics 4 under the advertising workspace. So if we go to the next slide, we are now introducing the advertiser workspace in GA4, which is essentially a home for advertisers to help you find and focus on the right data to meet key advertising use cases. The two reports that are currently housed here are the model comparison and conversion path reports under attribution. These two are essentially the enhanced and merged versions of the multi-channel funnel reports in Universal Analytics. So it should look familiar. We will dive deeper into these two reports as well. But before that, I also wanted to call out that you can now sign up to the GA4 Alpha program. The link is given in the slide to gain early access to features under trial. We are always testing new GA4 features first on our GA4 Alpha program signups. And if you would like to try out these latest Alpha features, feel free to sign up on this form. If we go to the next slide. So this is the advertising snapshot. You can access it basically through the advertiser workspace, which is on the left-hand nav of GA4. Once you reach the advertising snapshot, it is essentially a home page for the entire workspace. And here, as you can see on the top left, you have the ability to select filter for certain conversion events or even parameters like country or language. On the right-hand side, top right corner, you can see automated attribution, automated top insights and outlines for your business. For instance, these automated insights could tell you that referral and direct drove 25% of your revenue last month, or that display appeared in more than 40% of your conversion paths. So we'll continue to feature top insights that we believe would be useful for your use case. And on the bottom, you can see the two reports that are currently in the advertising workspace that we are giving a quick intro to, and you can dive deeper by clicking on the highlighted links. So these would be the conversion paths and the model comparison reports. If we go to the next slide, we can dive deeper. So this is, the first one is the model comparison report. It essentially allows you to compare how different attribution models attribute credit across either channels, source, medium, and campaigns. On the right-hand side, you can actually adjust the conversion reporting based on either interaction time or conversion time. Interaction time essentially allocates credit across the timing of various touch points to conversion. And the conversion time, all credit is based on the timing of that conversion. So the default is conversion time, but you have the ability to choose interaction time as well. On the report itself, you can obviously select and compare across different models, and you can also filter on that plus sign that is highlighted there. You can filter and answer deeper questions like which country or city is driving the highest share of, say, retargeting, or what is the favorite channel based on age, gender, audience, or which source, medium, or campaign values acquired a session within a channel's traffic. So you can do all sorts of interesting comparisons and gather insights about your business or advertising use case. If we go to the next slide, we can dive deeper into the conversion paths report. So here, this is essentially an enhanced version of the reports that you used to see in Universal Analytics. Here we are essentially combining and merging together the conversion path, the path length, and the lag report for multi-channel funnels in Universal Analytics. We also have on the top a new customer journey visual with early, mid, and late touchpoints. The early touchpoints include the first 25% of the touchpoints in the path, rounded to the nearest whole number. This segment is empty if the path has only one touchpoint. The middle touchpoints, touchpoints includes 50% of the touchpoints in the path. If the path has less than 3 touchpoints, this segment is empty. And the late touchpoint includes the last 25% touchpoints in the path. If the path consists of just one touchpoint, this segment does have that touchpoint. So this is a new visual that we hope you'll find useful. Also on the top, you can again select and filter for paths with a selected number of touch points. You can also switch the attribution model to see how the different models attribute credit differently across the paths and adjust the grouping that you've selected based on either default channel groups or source, medium, and campaign. And on the bottom there, you can, it's not fully visible on the slide, but you can essentially see the top conversion paths, time to conversion, and number of touch points to conversion. So this is the conversion paths report. Next, I'll talk about the key models that we have in GA4. Most of this will look familiar and most of this is self-explanatory, but I will quickly go through them. So the first one is cross-channel models. And if you look at the first one, this is the non-direct last click. This has been around for a while. This essentially ignores direct traffic and attributes 100% of the conversion value to the last channel that the customer clicked through, or the engaged view through for YouTube, something we'll also touch upon later. The first click gives all the credit for conversion to the first clicked event. And some interesting comparisons you can do here are comparing the cross-channel last click model to the cross-channel first click model to identify undervalued campaigns that are starting customers down the conversion path. This is especially useful if you're looking to drive more customers to your website or app. Then we have the linear model, which distributes credit for conversions equally across all clicks on the path. You have time decay, which gives more credit to clicks that happen closer in time to the conversion. Cross-channel position-based models, which essentially gives 40% of the credit to both the first and the last clicked event, with the remaining 20% spread out across the other clicks on the path. And data-driven attribution, which assigns credit based on how the addition of each click event to the path changes the estimated conversion probability. The data-driven algorithm uses features including time between the click event and the conversion, format type, and other signals to calculate this credit, as Matthias went through in the previous section. Something that's new here is the ads preferred last click model, which essentially attributes 100% of the conversion value to the last Google Ads channel that the customer clicked through before converting. If there is no ads click in the path, the attribution model goes and defaults back to the non-direct cross-channel last click. If we go to the next slide. So this is a new, and this actually is attribution settings in your admin in Google Analytics 4. So this is a property level setting that allows you to select an attribution model that applies to several GA4 reports. And one point to note here is that this attribution model that you select in the admin will apply to all reports, all event scoped reports in GA4, but will not apply to the reports we just went through, which are the model comparison and conversion path reports, where you have your own attribution picker, which you can select at those report level. So right now, this is defaulted to DDA, cross-channel DDA, but you have the ability to change it at the admin level. If we go to the next slide, we here come to another big feature in GA4, which is enhanced reports which factor YouTube EVCs in path to conversion for users. So the first thing that needs to happen for this to exist is linking your property to Google Ads and activating Google signals. Then if a user on YouTube watches at least 10 seconds of a skippable in-stream ad and then converts on your website within 3 days of viewing that YouTube video, then a YouTube web engaged view conversion event will be available in your analytics reports. So this is new to GA4, and this should help you understand how YouTube engaged view conversions exist in your reports and how they impact your overall user journey towards conversions. There are also a couple of links on this slide which can help you dive deeper into what this means and how this works in GA4. Now, where to find these and access these YouTube EVC reports? You can essentially do this in these ways. One is go to reports, go to lifecycle, engagement, and conversions, or go to reports like lifecycle and acquisition. Both of these are similar with just a different view. And in terms of how to select YouTube videos and view it, you can filter on the Google Ad network type to YouTube videos to spot your YouTube campaigns in the report. One big call out here is if you are previously exporting universal analytics goals and ads, when ready, should ideally switch the conversion source to GA4 goals. This enables YouTube enhanced view conversions and ads, which is currently not possible with the universal analytics goals. Now I will switch it over to Mats to talk more about GA4 conversion exports to Google Ads.
Thank you, Naomi, for covering that section. Also, thank you very much for waking up very early to attend this live stream. Really appreciate that. So my colleagues, Matthias talked about the vision and the direction of travel for our attribution products at Google. Naomi talked a little bit more about the newer features we've launched in GA4 from a reporting standpoint, and I'll cover how advertisers that are more advanced, ready to start taking decisions and actions with this data, are leveraging better attribution for their bid optimization or media buying. If I forgot to mention, my name is Matt, which is earlier mentioned by Matthias. I work as a strategy lead for analytics and attribution for Google here in EMEA. So maybe to kick us off, before we get into automation and why that's necessary, one call out I would love to make is that your channel groupings within Google Analytics 4 overrides the way you look at the reports and measure the performance, the way Naomi described, but also impacts the way you use that data for bid optimization. So it's really critical to have the right channel grouping in place. We use the default channel grouping that you've assigned in Universal Analytics back in the way we group channel and its data in GA4, and there'll be more developments on this plan to make this a little bit more easier process, more flexible process in GA4. Stay tuned for that as well. But in general, your channels are grouped based on auto tagging in place. If you have that, that covers all of your Google Media channels. That's in the green here on the slide. And anything that's not Google Media, you can track that in Google Analytics. You just need to have the right channel parameters appended to it. So if you have them in place, and this is just a quick dictionary, your reporting will flow correctly. Now, once you're done with reporting, a lot of our advertisers want to go a step further, and our best practice recommendation is to start using conversion and attribution from a much wider perspective, like Google Analytics, and then use that as a source of reporting and bidding in the buying doors we have, like Google Ads or SA360 or DV360. as well. One thing I would mention here is if you are getting to a point where you want to use Google Analytics, or you have been using Universal Analytics in the past as a source of conversions for reporting and bidding, you should expect change in the overall conversion volume. Matthias mentioned how we have a stack of Google products, and individual products measure more channels. So for the same conversion, you now have more channels that share the credit. Hence, your total reported conversions for an individual channel might drop. That does not mean ineffective media buying. It just means that's the share of impact a channel has towards your overall volume or bucket of conversions. So expect that when you start thinking about integrations towards Google Analytics 4 as well. And if you're using Universal Analytics in the past, that's something you're aware of and are using already. Now, we have built a lot of integrations, and there are some on the roadmap that will help us unlock better media buying in all of our buying doors. The ones that are live yet is Google Ads and DV360. For SA360, that's obviously on the roadmap. We have a session that covers DV360 and GA4 integrations in the coming months, right in this podium. So we'll cover integrations and reporting and bidding for DV there. For today's session, we thought we can focus on Google Ads because that itself is a lot. And we'll talk through how advertisers in the past have been using Universal Analytics as a source of conversions, piped back into Google Ads for reporting and then bidding. And now they're moving towards using GA4 as one of their sources, or the source for reporting and bidding. When this happens, when advertisers start linking and bringing data in, we've optimized the pipeline based on the amount of conversion volume we can drive to more efficiently run automated campaigns. What I mean by that is there is a setting or a rule in place, which was always in place for Universal Analytics, that administered how we brought data from Google Analytics into Google Ads. They're essentially, the way I would describe it is a backend model. For web conversions, we looked at non-direct last click when we would export data in ads. And for app conversions, we looked at something called the ads preferred last click model. I'll explain to you what this means, but this is a standard we had in place to optimize the volume of conversions that would land in a media buying solution like Google Ads. And then that became the source of reporting and then potential bid optimization. Any attribution models that you then pick on top of it would only improve the performance thereafter. So the first one I mentioned for web conversions, the way it really worked was we would ignore the presence of a last touch point if it was a direct, and we would override that to look at any touch points which had a Google Ads touch or an engagement. So for this example, I'm just giving 3 different paths with 3 different sets of touch points before a conversion. When you would bring this pathing data into Google Ads, for the last touch points, for example, it would get full credit under paid search. Hence, it would get exported over. For touch points or for paths which would end in an email or an organic search engagement, which is not a direct touch point, those paths would not be brought into Google Ads for reporting and then bid optimization. This is the way it works for web conversions when you bring web conversions from analytics to ads. For apps, we had an ads preferred model, and advertisers who've been using Firebase, they're very familiar with it, where we would preface and bring converting path data when we would see a user having a ads touch point, which may not be the last touch point in the user path. So in this case, all these 3 paths would get pulled into Google Ads for more attribution modeling to be run on top of it, just because they had a touch point from a Google media. Again, the idea here is to improve the volume of conversions you bring back into ads. Once you understand this concept, I think it's very clear. What I'll now talk through is how do you link your ads account to an analytics account? How do you create a conversion within Google Ads to map back to an analytics platform and then use it for reporting and bidding? And then where do you change your attribution setting within Google Ads to make the most out of the data you just exported? So the next two slides are fairly kind of look and understand slides. So we'll put it in the email that we follow up with, but it's kind of instructional. When you are linking Google Ads and Analytics, what you want to keep in mind is you as a user who's trying to link ads and analytics have an edit permission for your analytics account and an admin permission for Google Ads. If you have that in place, you're in a position where you can link these two accounts seamlessly through the UI. Once you link, there's a set process of how you can start linking to individual ads account. All of the linking flow sits within the admin section of Google Analytics under properties, under product listings. So if you go through this flow, you'll essentially come to a point in the UI where you will see all the Google Ads account you have access to, and you can pick and choose the one you want to link. There are also migration tools built, which can help you do this much more quicker. One thing I would keep in mind is make sure some of the defaults are kept in place, like enable ads personalization, enable auto tagging. This will just improve the overall linking flow ease for you, and also improves the quality of data you bring back into analytics and Google Ads for reporting, as well as media buying. Now, once you're done with the linking, the next step is identifying a conversion in Google Ads. This is just a quick screenshot of what you would see in Google Ads, and where you would now have the ability to pick a conversion source, which is beyond your old universal analytics conversion source. It's now essentially a preferred way to bring data versus universal analytics, which was in the past. Under conversions, you can hit the import button, and within the import, you'll get a set of options where you can bring various different forms of conversion sources. One of them would be listed as Google Analytics 4 properties, and you can either bring a app conversion, which is essentially your GA4 Firebase conversion, or you can bring in a web conversion in Google Ads. Once you bring this data, just keep in mind, you have to be aware that if you have two properties connected, UA as well as GA4, you might double count your conversion volume. So make sure you exclude the old UA account if you get to a point where you're not using it, and just exclude it from being used in any kind of bid optimizations. It's actually a good idea to just include that at start, because you can see side by side how both the numbers are trending before you start using GA4 as a source. Once you bring the conversions in Google Ads, there are two places where you can find a lot of reports that can help you with better insights, similar to the way you have in GA4. These reports are broadly categorized under pad reports like top paths or path metrics, assist conversions, and then you have the classic model comparison report where you can see all the attribution models side by side. You can find all of this within your Google Ads UI through measurement and attribution dropdown. Keep in mind when you're here, the source of conversions is critical. So there's a dropdown in these reports where you can pick the exact source of conversion you want to report the data by, and make sure you use the new conversion source that you've just pulled from Google Analytics 4 property types. All right, once the data is in Google Ads, the next thing you want to do is use it for bid optimizations. And in the settings of your conversions that you just exported, which is in the conversion settings, you want to include the conversion in the conversion column, or by virtue of which it becomes part of bid optimization and smart bidding. And there's an attribution model setting here, which you want to switch to DDA. This is critical because if you don't switch it to DDA, you will continue bidding to the last touch point, which is less efficient. Why is it less efficient? So let's take a step back. Some of the stuff that Matthias explained earlier, if you're looking in Google Analytics 4, for example, under a last click model, in this example, let's say you have 4 ad touch points and a conversion. The last click model will give full credit to the last touch point. When you switch to a DDA model, all the touch points are evaluated, and that one conversion credit is shared as fractions across all the media touch points that the account can identify in the user's property. This is just a reporting view. I explained how we bring data between Google Ads, Google Analytics, and Google Ads. The attribution setting within Google Ads also has an impact on how media buying can be improved. Let me explain that with very simple 3 paths here. So for the first example, we just took the first path that I initially explained to you. There are 4 media touch points resulting in a conversion. If you're looking in a report in Google Analytics and your reporting attribution model is DDA, you will share credit to all the 4 touch points in a more scientific manner. As I explained, when you bring data in, it'll look at the last touch points, and if there's an ads touch point, it'll bring that padding data that uses data in Google Ads. So the export between analytics and ads is based on a specific setting or a rule setting. But once the data lives in Google Ads, we have the ability to upgrade the attribution model and re-give back credit to all the touch points, ad touch points, which helped drive that conversion. So what happens essentially is when you go to that setting that I just shared in the last screen, and you switch the attribution setting to DDA, the conversion credit for all the media touch points that Google Ads can see gets redistributed credit for. So again, you have one conversion, but the credit allocation goes backwards to all the touch points Google Ads can see. And this is really critical because you want your media buying to reflect the reality of how these campaigns are performing. So if, say, search helps in the upper funnel, driving conversions down the funnel, and then YouTube helps convert them, you want search to get some credit based on its impact on the overall user journey. Hence, this is the way it works, and we are trying our best to make this the default in the coming few quarters. But in general, when you switch your attribution model to DDA in Google Ads, it improves the performance of your campaigns because it rehashes back to all the touch points that drove credit for that conversion. Now, Matthias also mentioned earlier, we've been testing in this little feature called the attribution beta within analytics, ways in which we can improve our pipeline. So I won't get into the details there. There's an article which kind of talks about that, which is on Think with Google, so we can share that in our follow-up. And that article also mentions one of our clients that has been testing this new features and has seen better improvements in overall performance by going towards GA as a source of conversions using this new pipeline. Our plan, just like Notino, is to give more advertisers the ability to try this new improvements out, and we will be launching these improvements in Google Analytics in the coming quarters. When having a conversation around attribution and analytics, and especially around actions you can take after these conversations are concerned, it's important to gamify and at least make the whole process a little bit interactive. So in the slides we'll follow up with, you'll see a bit of an interactive exercise you can run with your internal stakeholders, or if you are an agency or a partner working with clients, with your client stakeholders, on how you can sit together, make a plan on what KPIs matter for your business, identify the way you want to track your channels, and then take it to the next level. They'll put together a plan on activating on this better conversion and attribution data. Where possible, please reach out to us. If you have a Google account manager who can be part of this discussion, he would be happy to be part of these conversations, and potentially that can be part of the business plans we put together for you, along with the wider projects you're working with Google on. With that said, we covered a lot. GA4 is a brand new way of looking at our analytics as well as attribution data. And we are updating a lot of our Help Center articles. I'll kind of mention this 3 posts we have on the Analytics Help Center that talk specifically about the attribution reports and the features which Naomi mentioned earlier, and they're listed on our Help Center. We'll try our best to keep updating this as new features come out. So please bear with us. If you see something missing, please call out, and we'll try our best to keep updating these Help Center articles. To wrap all of this up, in the interest of time, we do want to keep some time for Q&As. There are 3 takeaways that we would want you to take. Firstly, set up conversions and set up proper channel tracking so you can start making sense of the data you have and get to a point where you can act on this data. Channel tracking is critical to the way you identify, categorize your channels, and then it has a knock-on impact on how you attribute conversion credit to. Secondly, once your setup is in a place where you feel confident in reporting, I encourage you to check out the exploration report, the conversion path reports, and model comparison reports. These are the ones that Naomi walked us through. These reports will give you a flavor of how your user journeys are, how spread out they are, how they impact towards your overall conversions. And when you're ready, link your Google Analytics and your Google Ads account. And instead of using the old Universal Analytics as a source of conversions for reporting and bidding in Google Ads, you want to migrate towards using GA4 as a source for reporting and bidding within Google Ads. While doing that, just make sure your setting is data-driven. It will hopefully be default at some point in time, but if it's not, just make sure it is default in the account that you use for reporting and optimization, because as I explained to you, it overrides the way credit gets redistributed to all the media touchpoints that helped drive that conversion. And that setting lives within Google Ads right now. So that's a little bit of an act piece there. There's a question that one of my colleagues might have put out for you. We would love for you to answer that question. It's a quick poll that gives us a sense of how you're looking at the business journey as well, and how you're looking to activate some of the stuff we just talked about. And that's all I had on the automation side of data-driven attribution. We'll take a pause here. Hopefully my colleagues can jump in as well. And we collected a lot of questions while you were watching this, and you're grabbing all this information, as well as we got a lot of questions before the session started. So we'll try and go through them individually. Hopefully we can answer the important ones, and if we don't, we'll find you and we'll make sure you get the answers. So Matthias, maybe I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, that's okay. I think actually the first question is for Naomi, so I'm gonna turn it over to Naomi.
Thanks, Matthias. So the first question that we got was, how does GA4 assign an attribution? So we ended up covering this in detail in our presentation, so I will not go too deep here. We have the 6 cross-channel models, of which 5 are rules-based and 1 is data-driven attribution, and we have the ads preferred model. I'll just give a brief snippet on the cross-channel data-driven attribution model, because I'm assuming this question might be referring to that more specifically. So in that, as we said, this model assigns credit based on how the addition of each click event to the path changes the estimated conversion probability. This includes a lot of features that both I and Matthias mentioned, which include time between the click event and the conversion, the format type, and other signals, including incrementality, to calculate this credit. So hopefully our presentation answered most of your questions here.
Cool. And then the next question is, the data in a client's account for data-driven attribution on GA360 versus GA4 is very different. How can we bring the results closer together, and how do the models differ? So in part, I'm going to rely a little bit on what we've talked about already, where I think in short, the new methodologies, as we've explained it, the quote-unquote old methodology for GA360 is the Shapley values, and there are quite some differences in that methodology. On top of that, there are loads of other things that I want to call out. So if you wanna compare the data model in general behind GA360, which is Universal Analytics in the basis, right? That is totally different from the event-based model in GA4. So that's a big one. DDA covers more touch points in GA4. It considers different touch points, so includes EVCs, for example, which may have gone unnoticed before and therefore wouldn't get any credit, but they do get some credit in GA4. There's cross-device, so cross-device attribution, if you turn on Google Signals, was not a thing in GA360 Universal Analytics, but is a thing in GA4. So all in all, I think as part of a recommendation, because I was thinking, how do I give you something? I think if you were to compare the last click for the exact same event, then the counts should more or less align, right? We wouldn't expect that if you have, let's say, a lead submission on UA as well as on GA4, where UA could be a 360 property. If you have a lead submission, these total counts shouldn't differ too much. If there is a big difference between them, we do recommend reaching out to our sales support team or account managers, and they'll be happy to, or hopefully happy to help you troubleshoot further. I also do want to say that we expect that the differences are likely going to increase as we see more and more complexities around cookies. Let me phrase it in that way. On to the next question. I think it's you, Matt.
Yeah, I can jump in for the next few. So we got one question from Mark, which is really 3 questions. So I'll try and cover them one at a time, because it's three different things back together. So the first one is how can I get the most out of my GA4 data-driven attribution model when it comes to mobile app conversions tracking, especially iOS? So that's a good question. I'll take a pause here. In UA, you have to do a fairly complex setup to start seeing attribution beyond just web, and in many cases, it really required a lot of customizations. GA4 ground up is built to be app plus web. So if you are using GA4 Firebase for tracking your app activity, whether it's iOS or Android, there is a SDK to support that. And once you have the SDK in place and you're tracking conversions, you can identify and bring a data stream, which is an app data stream of data ingestion into GA4. So it's essentially just calling out that in your GA4 property, you not just want web data, but you also want app data. Once you bring this in, all of the standard reporting within GA4 is available for you. So including things like attribution reports, DDA, they should work for web as well as app, and within app, Android and iOS included, if you have the SDKs set up correctly. Now, the advantage here is for a lot of advertisers, they have an app as well as a web presence. So they're essentially a hybrid advertiser or a hybrid business. That's where GA4 becomes really critical, because it's our first real product, which is app plus web enabled, ground up, hence it's app plus web enabled and cross-channel data driven when it comes to attribution. And ideally, you can use that to drive better insights for your user journeys. So that's your first question, Mark. The second one is, how can I use GA4 goals in DV360 custom bidding algorithms, the Python and script-based version? So as I mentioned in my session, we covered only Google Ads because we wanted this to be a 1 hour training, not 3 hours. But we have a session on DV360 and GA3 integrations in a month from now, where we will cover that as well. For anyone out there, the product is live, so you can use the integration. If you're using DV360 in the past with UA 360, you can now use it with GA4. The integration is free, so if you weren't using it in the past because you didn't have GA360, you can now give it a shot as well. It works pretty much seamlessly the way it was in UA, so you can build an audience in GA4, bring it in DV for reporting and bidding. You can build a conversion that you like in GA4, and using custom bidding algorithms or custom bidding within DV360, which is essentially part of our bring your own data policy. You can bring in this GA4 data and use it just the way you described it, using a Python or a script essentially within DV3 to map impressions that drove conversions according to GA4 rather than a floodlight, which is native to DV360. That by virtue becomes deduped, and then that becomes part of your reporting as well as bid optimization. It's a bit of a roundabout method, but that's the way DV360 talked with our Universal Analytics 360 product, and it currently talks the same way between GA4 and DV360. My recommendation again would be, if you're ready with GA4 and the data looks good and you're confident, start using this infrastructure for your GA4 goals rather than UA 360 goals. And then the final question is, what are the limitations of using GA4 segments as audiences in DV and Campaign Manager? So we just recently launched, so I'm also learning new things. But in short, this should work fairly seamlessly. We've seen some good examples of advertisers using audiences for better optimization, and it's very quickly becoming a hero feature, lack of a better word, for GA4, because it allows you to go a little bit wider in your search for users that are potentially higher bid customers, build audiences which may be predictive, and bring that data in your buying door. So if you are doing that in the past, I would encourage you to kind of build audience triggers, segments, bring that data for bidding, and maybe try out the new predictive feature, predictive audiences feature, which looks like at churn or conversion probability or revenue probability of users using our machine learning. This is net new, and ideally this can drive much better performance for you versus what you were using in the past in UA. That's all from Mark. I'll do a quick switch around. I think the next few questions as well is around channel grouping and the way we attribute. So can GA4 report on last non-direct source similar to GA3? I think we covered this in a way. You have last non-direct attribution models. We also Naomi mentioned we have ads preferred last click model. That's been there in Firebase, and ideally it's been very heavily used because it allows you to see ads touch points and an impact of an ads touch point, not just overriding direct. So I would encourage you to try that out. It's in GA4 right now. The next question, again from the same person, is around decimals. Does GA4, do DDA, with DDA attribution, should we expect to see conversions as decimal numbers rather than integers? And that's a good point. That was always the case with Google Ads and Google Analytics, but it's not very visible to people who are not using it, and they all of a sudden start using data-driven attribution models. So yes, you will see more decimals in your reported numbers, but when you sum all those decimals together, it should count towards one conversion. And that's the philosophy of our attribution models in general. On a certain day, you might see a reported decimal value. That's because activity in that day got a fractional impact towards conversions that were reported for that day. But it's fine to see decimals, and they're in many cases more accurate than before. The next question, again, I want to take one and then I'll hand it over to Naomi, is around apps. So the first one is in GA4 for apps. In Android, I see different source medium like Play Store, dynamic links, Google Ads campaign, but in iOS, we don't see anything. All is none, like direct. Is this because of ATT? Any possible solutions for this attribution issue? So first thing I would say, this might require a little bit of digging. It could be a tagging issue that could have impacted the way channel grouping works for your iOS campaign. Could be an SDK issue. So it could start from there. But in general, I've heard this happen when advertisers are not deploying the new consent mode for apps correctly, especially for iOS. So I would give it a look, give a Google search on what that means when you're using GA4 Firebase. There's also an article we can link in the in our follow-ups, and you can kind of get to it if you Google for updates to iOS 14 plus campaign measurement on our analytics help center. It talks about the two parameters, gbraid and wbraid, that are new, and that allows you to do better matching and attribution for Google Media plus beyond, for Android specifically. And I would encourage you to just check that setting correctly, because if you haven't deployed that and it's fairly recent, some of your channel attribution may look weird, lack of a better word. It has different impact in Universal Analytics versus GA4. So again, if you Google this, updates to iOS 14 plus campaign management, Google Analytics Help Center, you'll get to this article, and ideally that can help you sort out the issue you're seeing, but it's fairly new. I'm going to take a break. So Naomi, I'll hand it over to you if you want to cover a couple.
Yes, thanks, Matt. So the next question we got is, how is GA4 able to match attribution if cookies are no longer reliable? So this, we do acknowledge that we are now living in a new world of measurement, which is constantly evolving. For now, we'll continue using conversion modeling in order to maintain a full picture of your ads performance. And as it is with modeling, the more the observable data that we have, the better the model quality. Therefore, you can improve conversion modeling by increasing observable data by implementing other solutions we have, like the global slide tag, consent mode, and enhanced conversions. So that's our solution for now, and we continue evolving our solutions for this new world of measurement. I'll hand it over to Matthias now for our next question.
Yeah, perfect. Just one addition to what you just said, Naomi. Also, Google Tag Manager falls within that scope, right? So you can implement the global site tag through Google Tag Manager. The next question is about what method are you using to do DDA? In other words, are you using Shapley values, Markov chains, and so on? So what we do for our latest model is we start with a Poisson regression, which is spelled as Poisson, so Poisson regression. And then we start to layer on the things that I discussed, right? Time to event modeling, incrementality, signals, and that type of stuff. And I think the best way to understand this is to actually read that white paper that we shared before. So please have a read. If you still have questions, reach out to your Google point of contact, and they might be able to reach out to the right person. Then I think Matt again.
Yeah, I can jump in. So the next question is, again, very much aligned to modeling. And apologies, I can't really link out to what the question is around, but I'll just read it. How does GA4 attribution model account for co-founding, especially unmeasured co-founding? There's an article listed about the studies and methodologies that were out there. So maybe I'll just mention a topic. It can get very philosophical, so I won't dive into it too much in details. But Matthias mentioned we've always been expanding, and at least in the last 1 year, heavily looking at ways to improve our attribution modeling. We can't model for something we don't know. So, that's why advertisers run MMM studies where they go beyond just digital touch points, look at TV, radio, etc., and how that impacts their overall mix of spends and then impacts their overall conversions downstream. But the idea of co-founding is adhered to in a sense. We didn't talk to details about the modeling methodology, but Matthias mentioned we do something called time to event modeling to understand, does timing have an impact on overall conversions? It's largely inspired by something called survival analysis, which is an old methodology by John Grants, where it's used in epidemiology, just the way you described in the question around co-founding and how that gets factored into. So we do look at causality of events as they occur and their impact on overall conversions. And we especially look at that from a lens of timing. So if you look at a time series data, a progression of time series, does that also, along with causality, have an overall impact on conversions? So it is factored in, but it's a very deep conversation. We won't be able to explain this without losing half the people on the call, but we'll share the white paper that Matthias mentioned. Hopefully that explains you how we are trying to tackle the biases of co-founding in our DVA models.
Cool. So with 3 minutes on the clock, I'm going to try to rapid fire a lot of questions that we got in that are slightly shorter. So what is the difference between GA and GA4? I think the question is, what is the difference between universal analytics and GA4 properties? This is not maybe the right session to explain all of the differences, but the differences in attribution are as we touched on, right? So there's different input, more touch points, cross-device, cross-platform, so app inclusive, available without the minimum threshold, for free in all the standard properties as well, including EVCs, engaged views from YouTube. So these are the main differences in terms of attribution. Next question, will the slides be available? Yes, they will be available after the session. Next one is, will DDA in GA4 include view-based data? I think we tirelessly touched upon engaged views. And I can actually link this to another question we got. Are these engaged views coming from only Google Ads or also DV360? And to that question, we can answer that at this point, engaged view conversions are only from Google Ads. But we've recently launched a DV360 integration, so I expect that soon we'll have some more information to share around DV360. Could you explain in more detail which are the corrections/adjustments implemented in the DDA model? Again, I do recommend checking out the white paper that we have. If that doesn't suffice, do reach out to your account rep, and they might be able to get you more information. Then a question on specifically something I presented. What do you mean by last click exports to Google Ads? Isn't that already the case? And then I think, I'm not sure if that was part of something I said incorrectly, but currently we do export on a last click export to Google Ads. But within, I think what I meant is that within Google Ads, you would still need to select DDA, even if you use DDA in GA4. So that the last non-direct click export is not unique to any of the properties. That's the consistent export model. The next question we've answered already. Then there's a question, many clients I work with express limited enthusiasm for the advertiser workspace report because the ability to customize their channel groupings are currently not available. So this means that a lot of the valuable signals are going lost into referrals or unattributed. Can you share more information on when this crucial feature will become available to all GA4? So because this is a public session, we don't comment on our roadmap, but I do think that if you have a Google point of view and you have an NDA with us, that we can share some context on this topic. Then we, I think, are at time on the 2nd. So might we wrap it up here, team?
Yes, I think we should. We've collected the questions, so they're in the chat, and we'll try and get back to those we haven't answered. I want to personally thank Naomi and Matthias for presenting today. Thank you so much, both, and especially Naomi for waking up early it's probably the breakfast time for you now.
Cool. Thanks everybody for joining, and
Thanks,
hope to see you soon.